opening a review of a Marvel Studios production with a vaguely meta riff about how tired people probably are of meta riffs, about how played out it is to open a review with a meta riff on the theme of, well, Marvel does it again, is there ever going to be anything they're bad at, is probably the only thing more actually played out than a sincere non-meta riff on how tired people probably are of actually hearing, well, Marvel does it again, is there ever going to be anything they're bad at, save perhaps simply foregoing the layers of irony and saying, yeah, Marvel did it again, is there ever going to be anything they're bad at?
Oh no, I've gone cross-eyed.
Subject-relevant jokes about unnecessarily stacked layers of overly clever meta-comedy aside, if you were coming just to find out if WandaVision is any good or not, or rather how I felt about the first 3 episodes that were made available to critics and press for preview, 2 of which are debuting on Disney Plus starting today, the short answer is so far a very intrigued and enthusiastic yes, and also that this review is spoiler-free with only minor story and character business mentioned, so do with that what you will. And as for Marvel scores again being too predictable of a press narrative, what do you want? Look, it'd make my job a lot easier if there was more erratic quality variance in this particular franchise. You think it's easy coming up with 50 different ways to say, here's another rock-solid, completely good movie that won't really change your life or anything, but also has basically nothing wrong with it, so B+, I guess, in between the occasional great ones of this. But yeah, shockingly, when you let a really sharp producer fire the biggest possible gun at the widest possible target, it's not really that surprising that they almost never miss. Anyway, what's amusing is that the surprise, the MCU returns without missing a step narrative inevitably spinning out of WandaVision, is that at least this time, the seemingly untouchable production house almost seems to have been struck by an uncanny confluence of extra luck, like they needed that. Originally, this offbeat limited series, the first in what's already been touted as a deluge of Marvel content hitting Disney Plus in the coming months, was meant to premiere after a set of several Phase 4 theatrical films had already brought the cinematic universe back to, well, cinemas. But now, owing to the schedule-obliterating pandemic, it's ended up as the de facto jumping-on point for the whole new Marvel movie era, reframing Disney Plus as the narrative side foundation of the MCU continuum, which certainly has to make investors happy over at the Mouse House, but also to an almost preposterously well-aligned degree coalescing with the very unusual setup for the production itself, as audiences taking the somewhat unprecedented step of following a pair of superhero characters they last saw featured in 2 of the biggest Hollywood blockbusters of all time about to suddenly appear in a quirky half-hour TV show, which turns out to be about a pair of superheroes suddenly appearing in a quirky half-hour TV show. Or maybe it's not, except it definitely is, or isn't. Like I said, no spoilers here, and I also sincerely couldn't tell you. Let's back up. The central gimmick of WandaVision, at least as of, again, the first 3 episodes they let critics see ahead of the premiere, is placing Elizabeth Olsen's Wanda Maximoff, aka Scarlet Witch, and Paul Bettany's Vision, the star-crossed couple from the Avengers movies, both last seen in Infinity War and Endgame, wherein he got killed and she was not in a good place about it, into the world of a vintage American TV sitcom generously inspired by the likes of Bewitched and I Dream of Jeannie, wherein they themselves are a newlywed couple living in an idyllic small-town cul-de-sac having a lightly comic misadventures attempting to fit in while keeping their respective secrets, i.e. she's some kind of witch and he's a robot, from their neighbors. Each episode is structured as a complete episode of the imaginary retro sitcom, with full A-plots and B-plots, presumed running gags, catchphrases, etc., but progressing forward to a different stylistic era with each new episode, the first being an early TV Ozzie and Harriet-esque 50s affair, complete with deliberately fake effects, staging, blocking and shooting, extra-long stationary camera takes, and in black and white, the second being literally a beat-for-beat recreation of the early 60s Bewitched aesthetic, while the third is still basically Bewitched or Genie, but the later 60s one with the mod fashions, color cinematography, and slightly more playful innuendo in the dialogue. And if this already sounds more odd than you thought versus the slightly more bombastic advertising, it's also all in media res. We're dropped into this with zero indication as to why 2 of the Avengers are now starring in what otherwise looks like an actual TV show from 70 years ago. And while Vision and Wanda are generally aware of the character details about themselves, like he's a robot, she's a witch from Sokovia, for whatever reason people can't know about at least those 2 first things, like their neighbors or any other good sitcom character, they don't seem to know or care to know anything about where they came from, how they got there, where, when, or why, and they don't know why they don't know, or that they should know. And when moments arise in a slip of dialogue between the margins of what are otherwise straightforwardly presented sitcom hijinks plots, about like putting on a talent show or Vision's boss coming over for dinner, or in the details of the ominous fake commercials that run intermittently throughout the episodes that do make acknowledging the unreality of everything unavoidable, things start to get subtly but unmistakably tense and unsettling, as though there's something or someone in the ether that the other characters or the world itself around them is afraid of, that everything is trying not to provoke. But then something always happens to set things back in place for the next episode. So far. It's a difficult vibe to actually describe, especially because I'm leaving out quite a bit to avoid the spoilers. It almost feels like a PG-rated TV show version of a liminal space creepypasta or those GIFs that look banal until a ghost jumps out. A lot of evocation of the hyper-real, and that's not to say you'll be shocked. I realize that this largely comedic TV show from Disney, spun off from the costumed adventure movies for 10-year-olds, appears to be leaning into some fully abstracted Maya Deren or Matthew Barney piece. Snippets of dialogue spoken out of turn by characters in the midst of brief anxiety spells and sinister voyeuristic imagery that bookends each episode points to a definitive something in the something fishy going on part of the story. However cleverly it's at once acknowledged and obfuscated by various Marvel Comics and MCU references peppered throughout the stunningly detailed production design and costume work, it's clear there will ultimately be an answer, and it will almost certainly be more 2010 than 2001. However much the caliber of the darkness under the topsoil of suburbia and inherent spookiness of banal Americana aesthetic pushes WandaVision in the direction of becoming something like baby's first David Lynch. And just so I'm clear though, one does not in this case invoke either the specter or director of Twin Peaks and Blue Velvet lightly. Every work of dark Americana has bitten off Lynch's oeuvre in some fashion, yes, but somehow it's hilariously appropriate that a Marvel Disney production of all things turns out to be one of the few to attempt such and actually grasp the real energy. Certainly not in content or tone, but in approach. Lynch's autopsies of false societal nicety are authentically grim because they're informed by sincere affection for the ideals that are revealed to be false, not just menace but tragedy. He doesn't seem at all happy to be blowing the lid off cute small towns or happy neighborhoods being corrupt and evil, and yeah, absurd as it feels to suggest, WandaVision has some of that same energy. Not just in the general 50s kitsch gradually becoming more sinister aesthetic, but in the sense that it's very pointedly not here to parody or comment on old-time sitcoms. It's here to be one, to the point where the creepy stuff always seems to kick in whenever someone or circumstance is trying to make it be anything else. We're not, at least yet, doing the Pleasantville angle where the innate unrealness of retro TV is used as a metaphor for the real-world failings of the era that were being papered over or otherwise ignored in reality or on the shows. Whatever dark reality we and possibly the characters are being misdirected from, said misdirection seems to rely on the actual intended purpose of the sitcoms WandaVision emulates so exactingly, to be cozy, familiar, engaging, but unchallenging comfort food, presenting better than reality but not by too much escapism, so its recreations of 50s and 60s TV are not only magically wiped of the real thing's casual racism and misogyny, but also of any winking 21st century acknowledgement of what that would have meant in the real thing, and as a result, these are actually really good, straightforward situation comedy episodes, as in taken separately from the ever-hovering presence of something else is going on and the other details and occurrences that are spoilers I won't get into. What they've created actually works just as deadpan, non-satirical, real-deal retro comedy episodes with contained storylines, character beats, etc. that completely hold up on their own. Olsen and Bettany as this Darren and Samantha version of Wanda and Vision are legit great comedy team. They play off each other with fantastic chemistry, even better than they did in the movies. The writing is cute and clever. There's actual comic tension. In the wacky misunderstanding plots, they truly accomplish the genuine this is a safe and happy place full of fun people I want to wrap myself up in like a security blanket purpose of a classic family sitcom, which is why the so far fairly minor, until it's suddenly not minor, intrusions by whatever else is going on here into that space are so damn effective and unsettling. Instead of arriving like catharsis and an oh good, I was getting tired of all this Squaresville stuff kind of way, I found myself reacting with the same visceral anxiety as the characters, like, no, bad, scary, put Nick at Night back on. And so as I see it, yeah, that aspect of this whole thing is more Lynchian, quote-unquote, than a lot of other stuff that's tried to get to the same place. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean that WandaVision is somehow Marvel Holland Drive or whatever, but it also doesn't not mean that. What it means thus far, though, is that wherever WandaVision is going, it's off to a very strong and interesting start. And just as it also feels somehow wrong yet undeniably accurate to praise the charming originality of something created from equal parts nostalgia and licensed intellectual property, I'm also at this point pretty comfortable saying yes, the new Marvel streaming show is actually a weird, curious bauble of a thing that really does feel nothing like anything else currently running. No small feat in a crowded market. I can't say I feel as comfortable assigning an official number grade here, since this is something I was only able to see the first third of, but in terms of recommendations, I'd say this one is a definite should check out for Marvel fans and non-fans alike. I've got a really good feeling about it. I want to see where this is going.